Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Friday, August 8th, 2025, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research 2 channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, well, it's time to talk about the stone walls again, since this is what this channel is primarily about. And, it's not only about ancient giant humanoids or humanoids of any variety, which seems to be the case as more and more research develops the data. It seems to be going that way. Same with the living UFOs. I think after you hear some of my videos, you'll never look at a UFO report the same way again. And also nutrition. I talk about nutrition on this channel and my other channel, and it has something to do. Our health has something to do with the diets of the people who came before us. So we should be paying attention to that. So anyway, as far as the Stonewall is concerned, I wanted to turn you on to a guy who's an artist and an illustrator, among other things, and a Stonewall researcher as well, who's done a heck of a lot of research, and he lives in the Catskills, and I guess he more or less covers that area of New York State, and he seems to be a fairly well-known guy in those areas there. And let me turn you on to his page here, and I'll read some of his stuff, but you can certainly go there. I'll try to put the link in the description for you so you can just take a look at some of his stuff, because I love his stuff. And this is his page here, Matt Bua, and some of his sculptures and artwork and craftsmanship with wood and repurposing things and all kind of stuff. I'll read a little bit about the fellow. And the reason why I'm talking about this fellow is because of the research that he's done with stone walls. He wrote a book, which I really didn't know anything about, but his name sounded familiar, like he might have commented on my old page at some point. And I'm just bad at getting back to a lot of people with the comments and everything. I have no time. I have a job that just eats up all my time, and I have my feral cats that I have to take care of. That's my job that God or nature appointed me to, or whatever. So it takes up a lot of my time now, and at some point I'm gonna be 64 in October, so I think around 65, I'm going to just call it quits to participating in this shit show, and, you know, concentrate on things that I need to concentrate on. So, in any case, the reason why I'm here too is because I found that, because once in a while I got to look and see who's saying what about me, because I'm not there to defend myself if somebody says anything negative, which I found a couple of times, like some guy putting the comments on a page that I called the walls primitive. So he's thinking I call the walls primitive in the sense that, they're poorly built with, no particular style or plan or anything like that. And of course, it's not what I say about them at all. I freely say how amazing they are and how well built they are and the genius of them and everything. Here's a video on my channel where I'm talking about that while I'm talking about this corner that they put in this wall here in Mallory. If you don't know and you're not a subscriber, you just come across this thing. I'm not just a guy doing videos about things I don't know what I'm talking about. Here I am out in the field doing research at this amazing site in Connecticut. I have all these videos about my exploits there and nobody watches, but I think if somebody knew about it, they might want to watch it. But almost like Dennis D's page here on YouTube that nobody goes to. It just has amazing stuff on it. But in any case, I'm talking about the genius of the walls in here. I'm not going to even play it for you, but I just have to debunk some of these things every once in a while. So anyway, I came across this guy Matt Bua, and because he has mentioned me on his page over here, but let me read to you a little bit about this guy. And also, in his research on the stone walls, he's come to some of the same conclusions and sort of affirmed some of my suspicions about certain things. So anyway, let me read to you a little bit about it. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'll give you the link. You can go here. It's just I'm looking all over his site. I mean, found it about a month ago, um, July 3rd, I think, or something like that. So I came across it on July 3rd, and let's see, this is not going to load now. Okay. So anyway, where is it? July 3rd. Yeah. So I've been looking at it, whatever, and reading this stuff. So let me read to you a little bit about him here. So, Be Home Builder Matt Bua inspired and repurposed systems for creating a more empowered world. Welcome to my world at Be Home Build. I'm Matt Bua, artist and intuitive builder. My studio has slowly become a sculpture park experience called Be Home, and I've just now begun a new small company called Be Home Build, which is designed to help support my work at the art park and beyond. I'm in love with everything about the natural world. What is the splendor and bounty that she provides? How do we recreate her? What is the trick of intuitively putting the debris of our modern civilization to use? Finally, after all these ages of destruction, how can we begin solving our problems in the most efficient and harmonic way? These are the questions that act as my compass. It is these issues that are prime importance to me and are my highest aspirations. Matt Bua, artist, owner, Be Home Build. So here's some of Matt's stuff, which I just love this kind of stuff. Is working with wood and all kind of stuff. I like this little poem here by Helen Keller from the Song of the Stonewall. Come and walk with me, and I will tell what I've read in this scroll of stone. I will spell out this writing on hill and meadow. This is New England's entablature of rock, leagues upon leagues of sealed history awaiting an interpreter. And that is so amazing because I'm one of the people who says, and probably the primary person, and Jimmy the Paleo Mountain Man was really the one who brought this to my attention when he showed off the walls at his property up there in the mountains in Springfield, Vermont, which I went and visited him, and I have videos about that too on my other channel. And there's the walls are not just simply walls because the way that they're built, not very high, just sort of marking off certain areas and no openings in them and other things to them that don't make any sense in sort of utilitarian usage of them, but in a ceremonial sense and in a storytelling sense, they have some kind of language in them, whether it be an art language or a number language or a combination of them both. After I went up and saw Jimmy's wall up there in Springfield, Vermont, and I saw the man coming through the wall, I was like, holy shit. This is telling a story. This wall is telling some kind of story. And I've said it once before, is that you have to have an understanding of this stone language. You have to figure it out and understand what's being said because things are being said in these stone walls. Whereas, some sections are just stone wall, there are other areas where it's clear that there's artwork in there and other things, numbers, etc., etc. I pointed this out with my research, and besides the fact that I came to the conclusion that by identifying serpent heads, built into the stone walls, which were clearly, you know, made that way, designed that way, and built that way, sculpted that way, that all the stone walls are serpents. They have a recurring serpent's head built right into them all the time, whether down in Mallory, in Connecticut, there, in the Green Mountains there, the lower Green Mountains there. So, in any case, this thing that Helen Keller said, that's right. They're awaiting an interpreter to somebody to figure out the stone language and figure out what's being said. And I've been saying that for years on my other channel and early in the game, and certainly confirmed it all, after I went to go see Jimmy, God rest his soul, the Paleo Mountain Man, unfortunately passed away like 2 years ago. So, and in a similar fashion, like Jimmy was an artist, so his interpretation of the stone walls is from an artist perspective, with an artist point of view, like Matt here. But Matt's gone even further into it as far as doing research, etc., etc. So this tells a little story about him. And here's the book that he wrote, Talking Walls, which, how much more appropriate can it be to what my own beliefs and conclusions are of my own research here? Casting out the post contact stone wall building myth. So I've got to get this book. I had no idea it existed, but I certainly got to get it now. And here's some of the map that Matt made here, topographical map that he made, and some of his artwork here, and flyers and posters about a talk at the library here. So he's an interesting fellow here. Here's some standing in his artist builds. This is a New York Post story. Artist builds fantastical city by hand in upstate New York woods by Hannah Frischberg. So he's noted here. He got into the paper as well. So what's Matt doing besides his art? Here's some of his 2D works. I find some of his art really super nice and complex and interesting, all sorts of things. He reminds me of my other friend Matt that I talk about in my video about the Erie Canal, and he does posters like this on NASA. But here's some of Matt Bua's artwork here. Just this, I love this piece. Is great and great sort of wizard there and great stuff. I love this kind of art, this sketch art and whatnot. It's just fantastic. Love that sort of stuff. A big comic book fan myself and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, here's what Matt's research into the stone walls is all about. And it's pretty profound and pretty deep stuff here. I mean, it's well worth a read here. But he mentions me, and I find it very interesting as well. What he talks about in here. So let me just read a little bit to you. And I just want to point out a couple of things that he says here that sort of confirm my suspicions that I talked about in my other videos, like the Erie Canal and other things. But let's just see what Matt's saying here in his great lithic Catskill reveal. So, Call Walls, the game in full swing, calling all historians and general lovers of history and prehistory. Now is the time to share all your primary sources, evidence, and first-hand accounts you found, which references stone structures and walls built after 1492 by the newcomers to the Northeast. The game of call walls is now in full swing. The game is designed to call the hand of those who claimed there were no stone walls before the arrival of the Europeans, and or that the indigenous northeastern people left the stones untouched. Robert Thorson's belief, and Robert Thorson's is what Peter Waxman, the guy who mentioned me in his book, Shadow Under the Rock. Okay, this book right here. So, this is what Peter Waxman put in his book, and Matt here refers to it in here. So, look, I'm everybody in this field of research knows who I am, including Barbara DeLong, Secret of the Stones. I contacted her. She never bothered to contact me or watch my videos or anything, but maybe because of other things and I've got some, even though Peter Waxman thinks I'm a genius, his buddy, okay, Tim McSweeney on his Facebook page thinks I'm some kind of dull-witted moron or something like that, because I dared mention the Giants or whatever. Look, the Iroquois are the one who did all the work for us, okay? They carried the story into their culture about the stone giants, but I mean, after 1,000 years, they're saying they're stone or whatever. That's not it. They built the stone walls. That's why they're the stone giants, and Iroquois are happy to tell us that. It's just that, they don't know the exact story because nothing's written down, but nobody's made out of stone. Think about it. But are there giant people, in this corner of the U.S. in ancient times? Well, certainly, you know, even Bill Ritchie, the head archaeologist for New York State for many, many years, with all his archaeological finds of giant harpoons and knives and giant sized items that couldn't be used by the average sized human being. Constantly dug these things up everywhere, including many things he couldn't explain. But, and I've gone over this. I read directly from William Ritchie's uh, findings right here on my other channel. So, you know, it's a maybe and could be and possibly and all this kind of stuff. This is the language of archaeologists and anthropologists everywhere. Could be, does not connote a degree of certainty at all. So, in any case, Barbara DeLong knows about me and her great film, Secret of Stones. I love it and everything, but I don't think Barbara wants to have anything to do with me. But everybody in this field of research knows who I am at this point, and certainly Peter Waxman helped make that clear to everybody, even though, Timmy Sweeney has made me look like an idiot many times on his Facebook page there because he's got something that he doesn't like about me since I mentioned the Giants because they're all white and you know look, whatever the story is, it is. If the Giants were here or whatever, well, they're indigenous people here too, and I'm still talking about indigenous people, just a different kind of people. That's all, physically. You know, maybe they're indigenous too. What about that? What if they were the real indigenous people, and other people came later on? Look, Verrazano was the one that the first Indian that he met from Long Island was larger than he was and white. That's what he said, not me. Okay? That's what's in the annals of, Spain's historical documents. So, any case, let's read here what Matt's saying over here. So, any historical evidence of stone were built post contact after 1492 will be subtracted from the 252,000 miles they tallied and counted during the 1871 U.S. Agricultural Fence Census. Diary entries, survey maps made before and after the walls were built, prints or paintings that show the settlers actually building walls will be accepted. Otherwise, we will consider the stonework as pre-existing, quote unquote. Sorry, no negative evidence, quote unquote, will not be considered. Thank you in advance for your input, participation, and historical references. Speak up or forever hold your peace. These are the walls we are looking for. Let's keep turning on a new paradigm. Matt Bua. No need to respond if you are not able to find any historical evidence of walls or dry stacked stone structures being built in historic times. Neither could Susan Allport or Robert Thorson, except for the Asa Sheldon reference below. By the way, Susan Allport commented in her book that the energy that went into building all the stone walls in the Northeast was equal to building the Egyptian pyramids 20 times over. That's from Susan Allport's 1994 book, Sermon in Stone. I've mentioned that before in my videos as well. This is what it actually said in her book. Okay, I hoped and expected to find letters or diaries of at least one or two articulate wall builders with first-hand descriptions of what it was like to turn New England's confused mass of rocks and trees into fields and fences, to repair the same recalcitrant wall year after year. With all the walls and therefore all the wall builders that had once existed, this expectation did not seem unreasonable, though I knew it would require some searching. Yet I succeeded in turning up very little first-hand material that would give some idea of the flavor of this back-breaking task. Susan Allport could only find one scant first account herself, which she included in her book, while scratching her head over not finding any others. Asa Sheldon, a farmer, trader, and working man who was born in 1788 and died 1870, 1780 and died 1870, lived a long time. Yankee Drover being the unpretending life of Asa Sheldon, farmer, trader, and working man, 1788-1870. Robert Thorson, author of Stone by Stone, found no primary or historical sources himself and borrowed the Asa Sheldon reference from Susan Allport's book. One single reference between the both of them. So let's be generous and say Asa built 10 miles in his lifetime. Okay, great. So the core walls game tally as of 3/3/2025 is pre-existing stone walls of indigenous origins, 251,999 miles. Stone walls built post-contact, 10 miles. New tools for tallying, 2 sites for LiDAR. One is for the whole United States. The second is just for New York. I haven't gone to them myself, but I got to take a look at that. Now that some decent LiDAR imaging is available for the United States, we finally have a tool to see and tally up with more accuracy the amount of stone walls and running heaps we have in the Northeast. With the measuring tool included as a feature to the New York site, go to the Hillshade Imagery tab, and to the right is the measuring tool. Again, I propose we call the game Call Walls, where everyone starts counting up their walls and stonework, and if no historical evidence is available that might point to a quote unquote post contact construction, the walls will go into the pre existing tally. Many gray areas exist, such as when old walls are cleaned up and prettified in historic times. Even Robert Thorson agrees. Those who got the stones to the site and did the initial building did most of the work, which is not what he says in his book. He says that the people on Van Rensselaer's property were taking the stones out of the ground and piling them up and everything, so they didn't have to bring them anywhere. They just got them from the pile. That's all. They didn't have to take them out, do anything, according to him. So, that's just not what he says doesn't jive up a lot of times anyway. Also, let's face it, the fence viewers, Allport's named for the 1871 wall, and fence census data collectors who were traveling around the Northeast tallying the stone fences were most likely just counting the walls near farms and settlements, and they probably weren't going deep into the woods where no one lived, thus leaving out all those endless walls that still crisscross the land, basically in the middle of nowhere. From their final 252,000-mile tally, I predict that once we figure out a system for tallying the walls, the miles of existing stone walls in the Northeast will be at least triple. 750,000 miles. Looking forward to finding out. Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to finding out too. You know, Barbara DeLong said that there are probably more like 500,000 miles of stone walls. Okay, that's what she said. Now, Matt over here is saying more like 750,000 miles, which is incredible. Just incredible. It's just unbelievable. But if either one of them is right, it's just the census. And by the way, I mentioned more than once in my videos that just covers the northeastern part of the United States. It doesn't include Canada, which, hey, there was no borders in ancient times or whatever. Just build stone walls right across. So it doesn't include all of them and any other ones in sort of surroundings, adjacent states to New York, like Pennsylvania, you know, even into Indiana and Ohio and other places. More stonework. There's stonework everywhere, including earthwork everywhere as well, sometimes in combination here in the Northeast, which I show in my videos up there at Mallory. Okay, so here's the Helen Keller poem about how the walls are needing an interpreter. Well, I certainly concur. I've done videos about it on my channel about how the walls are saying something. I didn't need Helen Keller's little poem there to tell me all about it. I figured that all out on my own. Along with Jimmy the Failing Mountain Man, who's the one who gave me the basically the heads up with his wall that I had to go travel and see after he showed it on his channel. I made it a point to be there and see it in person with him. So here's some of the stuff that Matt has many pictures on his channel. Just some of the stuff is amazing. So this is the Great Lithic Catskill Reveal. And this is an open letter to all historians, prehistorians, geologists, and all lovers of the great mysteries of the past. Okay, so I'm not going to read a lot from this and leave it to you if you want to go and read about it here. I suggest you do. Okay, so let me just read this part of it. Okay, so the claim the western part of the town of Catskill down into Ulster County contains the world's largest ancient bluestone quarry reservoir system. Okay, so it's just interesting what he says here, and how it sort of confirms my suspicions about the Erie Canal and how a lot of the work was already done by ancient peoples creating these canals and, you know, artificial ponds and everything all over the place. Okay, so as some of you know, I wrote a book entitled Talking Walls Casting Out the Past Contact Stone Wall Building Myth in the Northeast. Since the book was released in 2015, I'm proud to say no one has successfully refuted my research and the conclusions that my book comes to. Many of the stone walls and stone structures, stone cans, vaults, chambers, dams, wells, we see all around us today are indeed of indigenous origins. Today I'm writing you to ask for help, not with the more contested who built the stone wall debate, but a larger issue. Who built the mind boggling large scale ancient reservoir system that runs the 30 plus miles from lovely Leeds and Catskill down through Harvey Fight's Opus 40 and beyond? Okay, so he's talking about, I think he shows it here in a map that he shows, okay, about this reservoir, this man-made reservoir that was dug up there in the Catskills. So this is exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to the Erie Canal. This is what DeWalt Clinton didn't want to tell anybody. Okay, first he tried to get the government to help, right? And they would have paid for it all. Meanwhile, a lot of it was already done, and DeWitt knew already how easy it was going to be. He consulted his engineers. They took a look at it and say, hey, this is going to be a piece of cake because a lot of this stuff is already there, and they knew it. And they lived during times where, they didn't think kindly of the indigenous people. They didn't mention anything about anything they might have done at all. As a matter of fact, the Dutch, when they first got here, they were busy chiseling off all their artwork off the sides of the walls of Hudson Valley there, which, made by the Hudson River, these sheer cliff faces with all kinds of artwork on them. I think that's where the stones at Brighton Beach came from. The jetty stones there with all the faces carved into them, they're all carved upside down. If you say, well, they carved them when they were on the beach. Well, they're turned upside down, they put it on their back, carving it, in the sand. They dug out the sand and carved the faces in the stone while the giant boulder there was on face down. I don't think so. But in any case, they were busy destroying everything and calling all their work like the lime kiln there at Twin Forks, Maine, saying it was a lime kiln instead of a native build structure. They're never going to say that. Okay, thanks to Alan Shurtlisker, that punk. Okay, so here he is, sort of confirming on my suspicion. All right. I propose that this lithic earth sculpting project is as large, if not larger, than the famed Hohokam Canal system that Jack Swilling discovered etched into the dry landscape when he first arrived in Snaketown, later renamed Phoenix, Arizona in 1867. And I talk about this on my other channel when I read C.W. Saran's The First American, and he talks about it in his book about Harold S. Gladwin, who opened up the first museum in Arizona, and he showed a bunch of things there, including skeletal remains that didn't have the same kind of skeletal anatomy that we did, and he dared talk about it, and he was hushed up at that time. I think Holmes was running it, and then Herb Liska followed up, but they browbeat this guy Gladwin and sort of shut him up, but he never got over it. He called them all punks later on. And I talked about the whole hokum, who were these ancient people that had built these canals, who had different skeletal anatomy, according to Gladwin and the researchers there. Weatherill, or whatever his name was, that found this stuff out there. And a mound there with a stone with an iron rod in it that they found there. That's they attribute to some U.S. military or geological survey marker or something like that was in a mound. It just didn't make any sense. But here's a stone with a metal piece of metal in it, and I think that was that from Serena's book. I'm not sure. I think it was. How do we know these reservoirs have been made by human hands? The shapes, many right angles can be noted in the aerial photos. These are not naturally occurring shapes from some type of erosion process. A truism goes something like there are no right angles in nature, with the exception of crystals. The amount of stone removed while quarrying out the reservoirs is often still present on the east side of the reservoirs. Large organized roadways, ramps, raised platforms are clearly still intact. The stone-built surfaces and structures are made with roughly quarried stone, with no metal tool marks present. Though one does find near these sites clear evidence from the brief historic quarrying industry, this evidence is only in very small concentrated areas. Okay, so I like his arguments here and the things he talks about and the things he's researching here, so it's just interesting to find out about. A quick summary of the issues and problems surrounding the Eurocentric stone wall building storyline. People have been living under a false assumption that the unfathomable amount of built stonework in the Northeast was completely constructed post contact by the European newcomers in less than 200 years. A rough tally of stone walls using government agricultural data from the 1870s came up with something like 252,000 miles of stone walls. This was supposedly after they used all of the trees for the much easier rail fences. 3 or 4 generations in and prior to the mass farming exodus that began after the market panic of 1819. This exodus continued in 1825 after the completion of the Erie Canal, and soon after the further opening of the West after the train system was created. By the panic of 1837, New York wheat prices plummeted 70%. I wonder if he knows about the year without a summer. That was really what caused the mass exodus out of the Northeast there. In the early 1700s, when Plymouth and Virginia colonies had something like 65,000 people each, we are told by Roland Van Zant in his book Chronicles of the Hudson that upstate New York lagged behind with around 20,000 inhabitants. For upstate New York to have something like 95,000 miles of stone walls tallied, that's 38 times as long as I-40 that runs across America, which with a very low population is highly unlikely. Also, we can't forget the various wars and conflicts fought in these early days of our country, as well as the harsh winters that froze the ground. Both made stone quarrying and stone building activities much harder to carry on. No doubt. Okay, I go over that, and which he mentions my video here, so he understands exactly what I said about it. The hard to come by historical evidence. Any researchers who looked into the gigantic lithic mysteries can tell you that the primary sources of first hand historical accounts of Europeans actually describing the building of these endless stoneworks are very hard to come by. Just ask Stonewall authorities like Robert M. Thorson, who wrote Stone by Stone, The Magnificent History of New England Stone Walls, or Susan Alpart, author of Sermon in Stone. This is where I really need your help as historians. As you comb our local histories, please alert me to any references to the construction or destruction of the old stonework. Well, there was that fellow, I read his book that I still haven't covered on my channel, where he just tore apart an indigenous stone wall and rebuilt it the way, because they didn't do a good job of it. It was messy and all kind of stuff. So he rebuilt it the way he thought it should be built, and destroyed an indigenous stone wall that probably had a whole story, a message, a sign, numbers, all kind of stuff in it. The argument for indigenous origins to the reservoirs. If an ice-free upstate New York was accessible 10,000 years ago, isn't it more plausible that indigenous people who lived here before us and who had something like 9,600 extra years to have worked together created this? I stand by the idea that we are, in fact, talking about an amazing communal sacred act of arranging and sculpting a landscape in collaboration with Mother Earth to benefit their whole community by creating reservoirs to hold and manage water. And certainly, they manage water. If they're building canals, they know everything about managing water. Okay? So that's nothing to sneeze at, and that's something you screw around with because it's dangerous. Okay, so you got to know what you're doing when you do stuff like build canals and reservoirs, and even here on Long Island, building artificial harbors and all kinds of stuff. You got to know exactly what you're doing. And even in a much smaller sense, with the brooks and streams and rivers and stuff like that, they also manage those as well using stone. And he talks about that here. We're getting to that. And that's, look, I don't know this fellow. Maybe he watched my videos or whatever, but he's been doing this for a long time. So he came to these conclusions by himself. Well, so did I. I stand by the idea that we are in fact talking about, okay, so this idea, okay, read that about managing the water. This idea is totally in line with current theories of archaeology from across the globe. In fact, even Christopher Columbus immediately took note of the advanced water canal system that the natives had constructed in present day Haiti. And if our local indigenous population was capable of making a mountain of arrowhead and flint tools at the Paleolithic flint mine in Coxsackie, when they could, why then could they have not made this reservoir system? Well, they certainly did. In managing fish resource, fish farming was part of all of this as well. Okay, it's such an easy resource to manage. Okay, much harder to manage all the wild animals in the forest and all kind of stuff. It's easy to manage the forest, trees, and all kind of stuff, but the animals, no. And not only that, overhunting could happen like in 1 second flat. Okay, but you have this abundant source from the water that is easy to manage and easy to artificially create artificial living spaces for them and to harvest them and everything. It's an easy thing for these people to do. No running through forests with bows and arrows. You have to do that. Only you have to do that once in a while for the resource. That's the only reason that they did it. Otherwise they didn't do it at all. They ate a lot of fish. Okay, so in conclusion, Matt says here, could this collection of massively sculpted bluestone reservoirs have been made during Greene County's 2,000 missing years that the late great New York State archaeologist emeritus Robert E. Funk referenced in his 2004 book, An Ice Age Quarry Workshop, The West Athens Hill Site Revisited? Where might additional Paleontological Indian sites be found in Greene County? The available data shows that sites in isolated lines of fluted points occur in much the same places as subsequent archaic peoples. In other words, they are all over the landscape. Some Paleo-Indian sites, including quarry workshops, might be found west of the Helderberg Escarpment, where there's a number of small quarry workshops of largely unknown cultural provenance. So, in any case, you can read all this stuff for yourself. I just want to get to the part where he mentions me in here, and I think, did we pass it already? Shit, I passed it already. Nope, somewhere down here. Hmm. It's gotta be below this then. No, I don't know where it is now. Holy cow, it's like I'm lost. Where is it? I know it's in here somewhere. Okay. Now I don't know. Wait a second. I know it's in here somewhere. Ay, ay, ay. Did I pass it? It like disappeared. Now I need to find it. Because he has a hypertext. I don't know. Maybe it is down here. Nope, I don't think so. Okay. So anyway, I don't know where the heck it is. Holy cow! So I I saw it before, or maybe my eyes are fooling me here. I thought it was in here somewhere. Holy shit! I know he mentions me here somewhere. Was it up top here? No. Boy. Oh, you know what? It's above this. That's that's where it is. Okay. So I passed right by it. Broadcast 7 is shaky but clear YouTube video series debunking mainstream history of the Stonewalls looked a little closer at the infamous 1872 agricultural fence census data and finds that it would have taken 15,000 men a staggering 659 years to build all the stone walls, since they generally didn't work on Sundays or during the winter months. Okay, so this guy knows about my research here that's appeared in Peter Waxman's book, although I don't know if he knows about Peter Waxman's book, but okay, so the one thing about Helen Keller's poem about the walls having to be sort of interpreted for what they're saying, and there's definitely stuff that's being saying there about the reservoir system up there in the Catskills being artificially created out of this stonework that formed the reservoir and everything. So here's additional backup to my hypothesis that much of the Erie Canal was already there, or at least waterways, engineered waterways that could be sort of improved and reused, or used as part of the Erie Canal system. I believe, this is just confirming that. And, hmm, like this thing right here, it looks very similar to something that I found at Mallory. This section of stone right here. So, built up east side of reservoir. So, he's sort of saying that here, that the indigenous people are using the stones to manage the waterways here. So, ancient stonework in relation to the waterways. Note the cloud serpents with their zigzag designs, and looks like possible stonework to help direct the flow of water. This definitely seems to relate to all of the stonework along the waterways and the quarried zigzag canals we have around Catskill. Image to the right above image found in Leroy H. Appleton's American Indian Design and Decoration, Dover, 1950. Stonework helping to create the bend in Creek View looking north. They say water with more bends and turns has more chi and energy. That's why you should go chasing waterfalls. Negative iron, goodness gracious. Same stonework looking south. Blue lines drawn to emphasize the little island that is potentially the result of the built stonework. You really have to see it in person to fully appreciate it. And he's right. You do have to see it in person, but I think I did a pretty good job here on my channel here when I covered this in one of my videos about how the people here at Mallory use.
Hey guys.
You see, here's the brook right here, and we're coming around from that bend in the brook there, and let me just show you this. All right, the snake shape in the brook.
Hey guys. But
And
Cat 7
I
here.
talk about it in this video, and I show down by the brook here about how where certain stones were placed to create the S curve in the brook. And then it ends up creating this S through there by putting stone on the opposite banks. And I show it in another video in going megalithic. I don't know if it's in 2 or 1. This is
Hey
showing the
guys.
S
But
curve in
Cat
the
7
brook
here.
over here.
Okay, it is May 1st, 2018,
And
and
this
we are
very
continuing along the trail in Sherman, Connecticut.
this thing right here.
Look at that. Look at this. It's like a lentil here. You know?
This
Look
is
at the size of that
construction
sucker.
here
And
that I
somebody put
found
that
at the
flat
corner of the
here. There's
brook.
another one over the size of
It's
that
very
sucker.
similar to what you see here that he's showing up here. That looks so much similar to this. Right here. You see this? Very similar in its construction. Okay, so here he is just sort of confirming what I believe about it. And here's another fellow, I don't know how much videos he's watched on my channel other than those first ones or whatever, but we come up to some of the same conclusions about these things, and probably didn't know anything about his work. Maybe he didn't know anything about mine, and here we come up with the same conclusions about things, Bo. So anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about with this. I don't want to get too, it's already too long already, but in any case, I'm going to put the link in. You could go there and look at Matt's. Just his site here is just amazing, and all these photos and everything that he's done of stone walls and his posters, everything, really great stuff. And obviously, from what I've read of it, what he thinks, and his own research on top of it. So go there and take a look at Matt's stuff there. And I actually contacted him. Maybe he'll get back to me. I don't know what we'll talk about exactly, but he did mention me in this part of his site here, so maybe he'll get back to me. I'd love to talk to him about what he thinks. So anyway, guys, check out Matt's site here, and think about the things I said about the stone walls, and of course, check out all my videos if you don't know anything about it. My other channel, I have a playlist and many videos about the stone walls and what I found firsthand. I'm not just a guy sitting in the